Welcome back. And today in the rod shop we're working on a GLoomis crankbait series rod. It's a moderate fast action for throwing your crankbaits, and this was brought to me today with a broken tip. Actually, it's not broken, it's just that the tip top came off. It looked like it lost its adhesion, and who knows where it's at, maybe stuffed in the back of a rod locker somewhere. And we're going to put a new tip on. We're going to clean this one up, do it the right way, and we'll cover that. And this rod will get a general cleanup of the cork handle as well. One of the first things I want to determine here is whether or not we're going to take the thread wrap off of the end of the rod where the tip top goes. And really the right way to do it is to remove that. But sometimes if you get a direct replacement for the tip top and it butts right up against it real nice, you get it glued in place and then put one nice coat of epoxy over the existing thread and the tube for the tip top to give it a little bit, nice seal there so nothing gets up underneath inside the tube. That's usually okay, but in this case, this is a GLoomis rod. It's a quality piece of equipment, and we're going to take our time. We're going to do this one right and pull the thread off the end of this, clean it all up, make sure that there isn't any fractures on the end of the rod, and put it back together. Next thing I'm going to do is make sure I get a little bit of glue up inside the tip top tube. That way when we push the guide onto the rod, some of that little puddle of glue will get shoved all the way up in that tube, and make sure that we get good adhesion up inside that tube. Once we have the glue in both places, we're going to warm it back up. Make sure the alignment is correct. We're going to wait for this glue to dry just a few seconds and try to peel it off of there nice and clean. And it's starting to harden up. Pull off all the residual. Ready to wrap. Okay, I've got the GLoomis crankbait rod set up on the winding machine here, the wrapping machine. This wrapping machine is a pretty interesting piece I bought. There was a local rod making shop that was making this by hand at one time, and I bought it off of a gentleman that was no longer using it. It's quite a few years old. I really don't know that much about it, but doesn't have any electric motors or nothing, and it's just a hand winder, and it works just fine for me. But that's what we're gonna wrap the end of this rod with for the tip top. The thread I'm going to use today is going to be brown to match, which is a size A thread for the main color, and then the trim band is done in a metallic gold. So we're going to wrap that up on the end here and make it look just as it was. Okay, as you see now, we've got it all wrapped up. We've got the brown and the gold trim bands, and we're ready for epoxy. This GLoomis cranking rod some more. We're going to put the epoxy, the flex coat on the tip top thread that we put on there. I believe it was in part 1 of this video for this cranking rod. But I want to show you the cork sealer has dried now on this handle. The last we looked at it, I had just put the application of the cork sealer on, and it had a bit of a shine to it, and as promised, it went away, and you can't even really see the product on there anymore, and that's just what we're looking for. Not a lot of buildup, but you can see where the filler is in there, and it's nice down and nice and flat. It's just a little bit lighter, the filler is in some areas, but it really blends in fine, and it came out real nice. That's looking real good, and cleaned up the reel seat real nice. There's not any buildup of any fish gook or peanut butter and jelly or whatever was stuck all over it, but that's all cleaned up real nice now. And we're going to move on to putting some of the epoxy over where we wrap the threads by the guide. And the next thing I'm going to cover is I'm going to go through mixing up the two parts, and it's pretty basic. It's just a 50-50 mix, but some things precautions I take so I don't contaminate my syringes that I use for measuring and mixing, and I'll show you that as we set up the camera again in another position. Before we get into the mixing, I wanted to get a look at this. It's a coffee cup heater is what I use, and the epoxy resin and hardener works a lot nicer when it's at least 80 degrees temperature. In the house here, the room temperature is probably around 68, and so I put it on the warmer for a bit, and you can see that, you know, it's pretty thin now, which makes it a lot nicer for it to flow on the rod, and the mixing is a lot nicer, and you don't get as many bubbles, and it's all works that much better when it's warmed up a little bit. Okay, one of the things I wanted to show is that I always keep my syringes in separate baggies. What I find is if you put them in the same baggie, or sometimes even in the same drawer, that the activators for the hardeners and the resins will they will intermingle and start to dry and get crusty around the tip of this syringe, and that's just all bad. It just won't, you'll end up throwing these things away, and I want to try to use these as many times as I can. I always start off with putting in the cup the resin first, and the reason why I do that is because when I mix it, I don't get as much of the resin off of the bottom as and scraping it off with the little mixer. At least it'll harden up. It'll be just a little heavier on the hardener than the resin, and that's okay. I can deal with that. But if it doesn't harden up, then I have a problem after I put it on the rod. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the syringe, and I'm going to take out a half a milliliter, just a very small amount, because we're only doing on this rod we're only doing one guide. Put that in the cup. I always make sure I wipe that off the best I can and put it back in to my baggie that's marked for the resin syringe. Zip it right up immediately. And then I'm going to take a bit of the hardener, the same amount, half a milliliter, 0.5. And another thing that you'll notice if you do this yourself, with the hardener and the resin warmed up a little bit, when you draw it out of the bottle, since it's thinner, you don't suck air bubbles up into the syringe, and it gives you a more accurate measurement. Okay, and now it's all that's left to do is to stir this up. Like I say, I'm only going to be doing one guide, and this is way more than I need, but you got to have at least a half a milliliter of each to really just get a blend, a mix going. And as you're mixing, you'll see that it turns like a foggy color, and those are just the two chemicals mixing together. And as you go along and mix, it'll actually clear back up once it starts activating, and it'll get crystal clear. Yeah, a lot of guys like to let it set and tighten up and get thicker, but once I get it mixed up, ready to go, I'm ready to lay it on there. Okay, ready to go. Okay, this is going to be nearly impossible for me to hold the camera and film me putting this flex coat on here at the same time. So what I'm going to do is just show you what it looks like before the flex coat goes on and then after. But one of the things I'm gonna concentrate on is making sure that I get a little bit of flex coat up onto the tube, and that'll help keep water and moisture from getting up inside underneath the tube, and we'll hold that tip top on better. And I'll just ramp it up there a little bit, maybe a 1/4 inch up the tube, just to get it nice seal and secured. Okay, I've got the flex coat on there, and what I haven't done yet is get all the air bubbles out of the finish. And basically all you have to do is touch that once or twice with the micro torch, what I use in the shop on many different things. But just waving that heat past there, what it does, it expands those little air bubbles that's in the flex coat, and it pops them, brings them to the surface and pops them, and it all goes away. You'll see when you warm it up, you start to get a little bit of a drip start to hang off of there, which is normal, but you'll actually be able to see that drip as it starts to cool back down. It'll go right back up on, right back in place and smooth out real nice and even on the tip of that rod, on the end of that rod over the top of the thread. You can see that bubble's getting smaller and smaller, that drip is getting smaller, and now it's right back where it should be. All of the flex coat right on top there, nice and smooth. So I'll let this turn on the machine here for about 8 hours until that's completely dry, and then it's time to go and catch a biggin.